The night was cold and dark. Rain fell hard on the tin roof of Eli Turner's small farmhouse, making a steady drumming sound that usually comforted him. But tonight something felt different. The wind howled through the trees, and every few minutes, lightning flashed across the sky, lighting up the fields like daylight for just a second before darkness returned. Eli was sitting near his old wood stove, sipping hot coffee when he heard it, a faint noise from outside. It wasn't the sound of rain or wind. It was softer, broken, almost like a cry. He turned his head and listened again. There it was, a weak, trembling sound coming from the chicken coop behind his barn. He frowned. "Damn fox again?" he muttered, pulling on his raincoat and grabbing a flashlight. The storm didn't scare him much, but that sound, it made his heart uneasy. When he stepped outside, the cold rain hit his face like needles. The mud pulled at his boots as he walked down the path toward the coop. Lightning flashed again, showing the small wooden building standing crooked at the edge of his property. For a moment he thought he saw movement near the door, a shadow slipping inside. He stopped and raised his flashlight, but the rain blurred everything. The light beam shook slightly in his hand. He took a deep breath and kept walking. As he got closer, the chickens inside began clucking nervously, their wings flapping. Eli's brow furrowed. "Easy, girls," he said softly, though his voice trembled a little. He reached for the latch and pushed the door open. The flashlight's beam swept across the coop, the straw-covered floor, the wooden walls, the frightened birds. Then it froze. In the corner, crouched low and shaking, was a woman, or at least something that looked like one. Her skin was pale silver, almost glowing under the flashlight. Her eyes were wide and bright blue, too large to be human. She was holding something close to her chest, a small child wrapped in torn cloth. Eli's breath caught. His mind raced. Was this a trick of the light? A storm hallucination? He took a small step back, the wooden floor creaking under his boot. The woman looked up quickly. Her eyes shimmered with fear. Then she spoke, her voice soft and cracked. "Please. We just needed shelter from the rain." Eli froze. The child stirred, making a weak sound and like a kitten crying. The woman shifted to protect the child, wrapping her arms around him. He could see now that she was soaked through. Her clothes, on some kind of strange silver fabric, were torn and burned at the edges. Her skin had faint lines running across it that glowed gently whenever lightning flashed. Eli's heart pounded. Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked toward the open door, her eyes darting to the sky as thunder rumbled again. "They're still searching," she whispered to herself. Then looking back at him, she said, "Please. I mean no harm. My son and I, we just needed a place to hide from the storm." Eli blinked in confusion. Hide from who? But before she could answer, a sudden flash of blue light streaked across the clouds above them, followed by a deep humming noise that made the ground tremble. It wasn't thunder. It was something else, and something mechanical, powerful, and close. The woman gasped, clutching her child tighter. "They found me," she said in panic. Eli looked outside. Through the rain, he saw strange lights moving in the distance. Not headlights, not airplanes. They hovered and shifted silently, scanning the fields with beams of blue light. He turned back to her, his mind spinning. "What are those?" Her lips trembled. "Hunters," she said, her voice shaking. "They're not human." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the rain grew louder, almost deafening. The chickens huddled in the corners, sensing danger. Eli took a step closer, shining the light on her face. Despite her alien features, she looked terrified. Not like a monster, but like a mother trying to protect her child. He swallowed hard. "You can't stay out here," he said finally. "If someone sees you, they'll come for you. Or worse." She looked up at him, unsure if she could trust him. "You would help us?" He nodded slowly. "For now," he said. "But you need to stay quiet. Come with me to the barn." She hesitated, then nodded. Carefully, she stood up, still holding her child. The glow on her skin faded as she moved. Eli turned off his flashlight, and together they slipped out into the pouring rain. As they crossed the muddy yard, a distant blue beam swept across the far end of the field. The woman pulled the child closer and whispered, "Please hurry." Eli led them to the barn and shut the door behind them. The noise from the storm covered their footsteps. For a few seconds, the three of them just stood there in the dark, a human farmer, an alien mother, and her frightened child. Outside, the strange lights moved slowly across the sky, still searching. And in that moment, Eli knew his quiet life on this lonely farm would never be the same again. The rain softened into a slow drizzle, tapping gently on the barn's roof. The smell of wet hay filled the air. Eli lit an old oil lantern and placed it on a barrel. Its warm light spread across the barn, showing wooden beams, rusty tools, and a frightened alien mother clutching her child close. The woman stood near the far wall, still shaking. Her silver skin reflected the lantern's glow, and her wet hair clung to her face. The little boy in her arms had faint blue patterns glowing along his cheeks like tiny rivers of light. He looked too tired to cry. Eli tried to steady his breathing. He could still hear distant humming outside, those strange craft searching through the storm. He wanted to ask 100 questions, but when he looked at her eyes, he saw pure fear. So he spoke gently. "You and your boy can rest here," he said quietly, "but you gotta tell me what's going on." "Who's out there?" The woman hesitated, glancing at the barn door as if afraid someone might burst in. Then she whispered, "My name is Lyra, and this is my son Keo. We are not from this world." Eli let out a small laugh of disbelief. "Yeah, I figured," he said, rubbing his beard. "But you look hurt, and that boy looks half-starved." "What are you running from?" Lyra lowered her head. Her voice was low, trembling. "We escaped from my people. They wanted to take my son. They said he should not exist," Eli frowned. "Not exist? Why?" "Because he's half-human," she said, her voice breaking. "I fell in love with someone from your kind years ago, but our laws forbid it. When they found out, they came for me. I ran before they could take him away." Eli's heart twisted. The woman didn't sound like some alien invader. She sounded like a desperate mother. "You mean to tell me you've been running ever since?" She nodded slowly. "Our ship crashed in your forest 2 nights ago. We walked through the storm. We had nowhere to go until we saw the lights from your house." The child stirred weakly and whispered something in a strange language. Lyra held him tighter and smiled sadly. "He's hungry," she said softly. Eli sighed and stood up. "Wait here." He walked to the small storage room at the back of the barn and returned with some bread, a jar of honey, and a blanket. "It's not much, but it's food." Lyra looked at the bread curiously, then tore off a small piece and gave it to her son. Keo sniffed it, then ate slowly, his glowing lines dimming as he relaxed. "You're kind," Lyra said after a moment. "Most humans would have called the soldiers by now." Eli looked at her sharply. "Those aren't soldiers, not ours. Whatever's flying out there, it sure ain't from Earth." Lyra's eyes darkened. "No," she whispered. "They're called hunters, machines controlled by my people. They track our life signs. If they find us, they'll destroy everything nearby to hide the evidence. Even your farm." Eli stepped back, his face pale. "Destroy? You mean they'd kill anyone who helps you?" Lyra nodded. "They will burn everything." For a moment, silence filled the barn except for the slow dripping of rainwater from the roof. Eli's mind raced. He could throw her out now, protect himself, save his land. But when he looked at the small boy, thin and trembling in his mother's arms, he knew he couldn't. He crouched down beside them and said, "Listen, I don't know why fate put you in my coop, but I ain't the kind of man who turns away a mother and her child." Lyra's lips trembled. "You would risk your life for us?" Eli smiled faintly. "I've got no one left to lose. My wife passed years ago and my kids moved to the city. This old barn's the only thing I've got left. If someone needs help, I'll give it." Tears formed in Lyra's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know how much this means." Before Eli could reply, the sound of engines echoed again, closer this time. The ground vibrated as blue light flashed through the cracks in the barn walls. Lyra's expression turned to panic. She grabbed Keo and hid behind a pile of hay. "They're scanning," she said urgently. "If they detect us, they'll come." Eli rushed to the window and peeked outside. 3 glowing orbs floated low over the field, moving slowly, their light cutting through the fog like knives. "Stay still," he whispered. "Don't move." The lights passed once, then twice. For a few seconds, they hovered above the chicken coop. Eli held his breath. Then just as suddenly, they turned away and disappeared into the distance. Lyra sighed in relief, collapsing to her knees. "They didn't see us." Eli sat down on a bale of hay, his heart still pounding. "Well," he said quietly, "looks like you'll be staying a bit longer." Lyra smiled weakly, rocking her child. "For now," she whispered. Outside, the rain stopped, but far away, faint thunder rolled again. Or maybe it wasn't thunder at all. Something told Eli the night's danger was only beginning. Morning came slow and gray. The storm had passed, leaving behind wet fields and mist floating above the grass. Eli stepped out of his farmhouse, rubbing his tired eyes. He hadn't slept a single minute that night. His mind was still full of questions about the silver-skinned woman hiding in his barn. He carried a cup of coffee and a loaf of bread as he walked toward the barn. Each step splashed in the puddles, and the cold air bit his skin. The world felt quiet, too quiet, like the storm had stolen all sound. When he opened the barn door, the sight before him stopped him cold. Lyra was kneeling on the ground, her hands glowing faint blue as she hovered them over a small chicken lying motionless in the straw. Eli watched, amazed, as the chicken's body twitched, its feathers smoothing out. In seconds it stood up again, alive and healthy as if nothing had happened. What did you just do?" Eli whispered. Lyra turned quickly, her silver eyes wide with guilt. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said softly. Eli stepped closer, still staring at the chicken. "That thing was dead last night. I saw it with my own eyes." Lyra lowered her hands, the glow fading. "It's called restoration energy," she said. "Our kind can heal or rebuild life by giving part of our own strength. But it weakens us deeply." Eli looked at her with disbelief. "You can bring the dead back?" "Only small creatures," she said. "And only if their life hasn't gone too far." She looked at her hands, trembling slightly. "Every time I use it, I lose some of my energy." Eli scratched his beard, trying to understand. "So that's how you survived the crash?" Lyra nodded. "I used it to protect Keo when our ship exploded. That's why we crashed here. I had nothing left but my son." Keo was sitting quietly nearby, tracing small lines in the hay with his finger. When Eli looked closely, he realized the lines were glowing faintly, forming strange symbols that floated in the air before fading. "What's he doing?" Eli asked softly. Lyra smiled weakly. "He's learning. Half of him is human, half is from my world. His power is still forming." Eli crouched beside the boy, watching the light dance from his fingertips. "That's incredible," he murmured. "But if your people can do all this, why would they chase you?" Lyra's face darkened. She took a deep breath and said, "Because they turned our gift into a weapon." Eli frowned. "A weapon?" She nodded slowly. "My people, the Varisian Empire, used us to destroy planets that refused to join them. They trained healers like me to reverse our power. Instead of restoring life, we could take it away. I refused. I escaped." Eli felt his chest tighten. "So you ran. And they sent those hunters after you." Lyra's voice cracked. "They don't allow traitors. And when they learned I had a child with a human, they called him a mistake, a contamination. But Keo isn't a mistake, Eli, he's hope." She looked at her son, her eyes full of love. "He carries both our worlds inside him." Eli sat down on a hay bale, running a hand through his hair. "I never thought I'd hear anything like this in my life. Aliens, wars, powers," he sighed. "You picked the wrong planet to hide on, Lyra. Humans fear anything they don't understand." "I know," she said softly. "That's why I'm trusting you." He looked at her, surprised. "Trusting me?" "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "If something happens to me, promise me you'll protect Keo." Eli stared at her, shocked. "Don't talk like that," but she didn't smile. "They won't stop until they find us. Last night they passed over the fields. Next time they'll come closer." Eli clenched his fists. "Then we'll make sure they don't find you." Before Lyra could reply, Keo suddenly froze. His small hand trembled, and the symbols he had been drawing flared bright blue. "Mama," he whispered. "They're near." Lyra's eyes widened. "He can feel them," she said. "The hunters. They're tracking our energy." Eli jumped up and looked outside through a crack in the barn wall. A faint shimmer moved across the morning mist, not light, not shadow, but something invisible bending the air as it passed. "They found our trail," Lyra said in panic. "We have to move." Eli turned back to her. "Where?" "You can't go far with a kid." Lyra lifted Keo in her arms. "There's an old mine in the hills. If we reach it, they won't detect us there." Eli grabbed his coat and keys. "Then we better go now." As they ran out into the cold morning air, the shimmering shapes in the mist began to solidify. Sleek silver drones scanning the ground, closing in fast. Lyra whispered something to Keo, and his eyes glowed bright. "Cover us," she said. A wave of faint blue light rippled around them, bending the air, making them fade like ghosts. Eli couldn't believe what he was seeing. The barn behind them disappeared in the glow. As they slipped into the forest, he looked back one last time at his quiet farm. Smoke still rose from the chimney, the chickens still pecked in the mud, but above them, 3 silver drones were descending. Eli knew then that his life was tied to theirs, and the world he knew was about to change forever. The morning fog thickened as Eli's old truck bounced along the muddy road leading away from his farm. The sky was heavy and gray, and every sound seemed sharper. The groan of the engine, the splash of tires through puddles, and the faint hum that followed from somewhere above. Lyra sat in the passenger seat holding Keo close. The boy's eyes were half open, glowing dimly with blue light that flickered whenever he breathed. His small hands clutched his mother's torn silver fabric tightly. Eli kept one hand on the wheel, the other tapping nervously against the dashboard. "We're almost at the old mine," he said. "No one's been there for years. You'll be safe for now." Lyra nodded but didn't look relieved. "They are not far," she whispered. "I can feel their scanners. They're following our energy trail." As if to confirm her words, a sharp flash of blue light tore across the clouds. Eli cursed under his breath. "They found us again." The hum grew louder. He looked through the cracked mirror and froze. 3 silver crafts appeared in the distance, sleek, fast, and silent, gliding low over the trees. Their undersides pulsed with strange light, sweeping the ground like searchbeams. Eli's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Hold on!" he shouted. He pushed the truck harder. Mud splashed up behind them as the road curved through a field of tall grass. The old engine coughed and roared, but it kept moving. Lyra turned around, her glowing eyes filled with fear. "They're scanning for life," she cried. "They'll see us any moment." Eli's heart pounded. He had no weapons, no plan, just this truck and a promise he'd made to protect them. "Can't you do something?" he asked, shouting over the roar. "Use that power you used before?" Lyra looked down at Keo. "I can hide us for a few seconds, but not while he's weak. His energy is unstable. Then use mine," Eli said without thinking. "Take what you need." She looked at him, surprised. "You wouldn't survive it," she said softly. Before Eli could answer, a bright beam hit the road ahead, exploding in a burst of blue fire. The shockwave slammed into the truck, spinning it sideways. Metal screeched, glass shattered, and the world turned upside down. Eli's head hit the steering wheel. The sound of rain and static filled his ears. For a moment, everything was still. Then he heard Lyra's voice, weak but determined. "Eli, get up!" He opened his eyes. The truck had crashed into a ditch. Smoke rose from the hood. The air smelled of burnt rubber and rain. Through the cracked windshield, he could see the silver crafts landing in the nearby field, their long legs folding down like insects. "Go," he said, coughing. "Take the boy and run." But Lyra shook her head. "They'll find us in seconds. I must fight." She stepped out into the rain, her skin glowing brighter with every drop that hit her. Keo stirred in her arms, his eyes flickering open. "Mama," he whispered. "They're close." "I know, my love," she said softly. The hunters emerged, tall metallic beings with smooth armor and faceless masks. Their weapons glowed with the same blue light as Lyra's hands. They spread out across the field, moving in perfect silence. Eli stumbled out of the truck, his boots sinking into the mud. "There's too many of them," he shouted. "You can't fight all that." "I can't run forever," Lyra said, her voice calm now. "But maybe I can buy us time." She placed Keo in Eli's arms. "If I don't return, take him to the mine. Promise me." Eli shook his head. "No, you can't." Before he could finish, she raised her hands. The air shimmered as waves of energy burst outward. The ground shook. The hunters stopped, their scanners flickering. One of them raised a weapon, but it exploded in its hand, bursting into shards of blue light. Lyra cried out in pain. The energy around her pulsed violently, crackling through the air. The hunter staggered but kept moving, closing in from all sides. Eli turned and ran toward the trees, clutching Keo. The boy's body trembled against his chest. Behind him, light flashed again and again, each burst brighter than the last. The earth seemed to burn with silent lightning. When he looked back, he saw Lyra fall to her knees, surrounded by the hunters. One of them raised a strange spear that glowed red instead of blue. "No!" Keo screamed. A sudden wave of blue light erupted from him. expanding like a ring through the forest. The rain stopped midair. The sound vanished. For a second, time itself seemed to freeze. The hunters' armor cracked and shattered. Their weapons turned to dust. The ships above them shut down and crashed into the ground one by one. Then, as quickly as it began, the silence broke. Thunder rolled again, and Keo went limp in Eli's arms. Eli stood there, breathless, staring at the smoking field where the hunters had fallen. Lyra was still standing barely. She looked at him with weak eyes, her voice trembling. He saved us. Then she collapsed into the mud. Eli rushed to her side, shaking her gently. Lyra, stay with me. Her eyes fluttered open for a second. Go to the mine, she whispered. They'll send more. Eli looked up at the dark clouds above. The air buzzed with faint energy. He knew she was right. Lifting Keo with one arm and helping Lyra with the other, he began walking toward the distant hills Mdia, where the old mine waited like a dark mouth in the earth. Behind them, the wreckage of the alien crafts still smoked under the falling rain, silent witnesses to the war that had just begun. The path to the old mine was long, steep, and slippery from the rain. Eli's boots sank into the mud as he carried Keo in his arms. Lyra limped beside him, her skin dimming with every step. The glow that once surrounded her was fading fast, and her breath came out in short, tired gasps. The wind had grown cold again. Mist rolled down the hills like waves, covering the land in gray. Eli's mind raced with fear. For her, for the boy, and for what he had just seen. He still couldn't believe the small child had destroyed alien machines with a single burst of light. Keep going, Lyra whispered, clutching her side. The mine is just beyond those rocks. Eli looked where she pointed, a dark opening half covered by vines hidden behind tall pines. We're almost there, he said, tightening his grip on Keo. But the boy was weak. His skin felt cold and the glowing marks on his face flickered like dying embers. Eli looked down at him and whispered, Hang on, kid. We're not done yet. They reached the mine entrance just as thunder rumbled again in the distance. Inside, the air was cool and dry. Eli set Keo down gently on a blanket of old dust. He tore a piece of cloth from his coat and wiped the mud from the boy's face. Lyra knelt beside them, brushing her son's hair. His energy is draining, she said softly. When he used his power, it burned through everything he had. Eli frowned. Can't you heal him like you healed that chicken? Her eyes filled with sadness. Not this time. I gave most of my strength to protect him during the crash. I can't restore what's lost inside him. Only another source can. Another source? Eli asked. She nodded. There's a beacon inside my arm. If I can activate it, it will send a signal to the rebel fleet. They can extract us. But once it's on, the hunters will sense it too. They'll come again, fast. Eli looked outside the mine where fog still rolled through the trees. Then we'll have to be ready. He found an old toolbox left behind by miners years ago and began pulling out anything useful. Metal rods, wires, batteries, even a rusted welding torch. You said those hunters follow energy, right? He asked. Yes, Lyra replied. Then maybe I can make something to distract them. She watched as Eli started connecting the wires and rods. He didn't fully understand alien tech, but he knew machines. Back on Earth, before his farm life, he had worked as a mechanic. His hands still remembered how to bring dead engines back to life. Lyra tilted her head, curious. You're building a false signal? Eli nodded. Something like that. If I can make this thing hum and spark, maybe they'll chase it instead of us. A faint smile appeared on her lips. Humans, she said softly. Always fixing broken things. He looked at her and smiled faintly. That's all I've ever done. Minutes turned into an hour. The rain outside stopped, leaving the forest silent again. The air felt heavy and too still. Lyra pressed her hand to the mine wall and closed her eyes. They're close, she said suddenly. 2 crafts. Maybe 3. Eli stood up quickly. Then it's now or never. She took a deep breath and touched her arm. The skin shifted, revealing a small metallic plate with alien symbols. When she pressed it, a bright blue beam shot upward through the cracks in the rock, vanishing into the clouds. The signal is sent, she said. They'll come for us. But we only have a few minutes. Eli ran outside and placed his homemade decoy near the tree line. The machine sputtered, sparked, and began to hum loudly, its small lights blinking wildly. He returned to the mine and crouched beside Lyra and Keo. Now we wait, he said. Lyra took his hand. Thank you, she whispered. You didn't have to help us, but you did. Eli looked at her pale face, her trembling fingers, her eyes full of both fear and hope. No one deserves to be hunted, he said. Not you, not him. A sudden roar shook the air. Blue lights cut through the fog. The hunters had arrived. 3 ships hovered low, their scanners slicing through the forest. Eli's decoy buzzed louder, drawing their attention. 2 ships turned toward it, but the third stopped, facing the mine directly. They've found us, Lyra said, panic in her voice. Eli looked at her. How long until your friends arrive? 5 minutes, she said. Maybe less. The mine trembled as the hunter ship lowered. Metal legs crashed into the ground and heavy footsteps echoed outside. Eli picked up a metal rod and whispered, 5 minutes, huh? Let's make them count. He stood at the entrance, his shadow long in the faint blue light. The hunter's figure appeared through the mist, tall, gleaming, and deadly. Inside, Lyra pressed her hand on Keo's chest, whispering softly in her language. The boy's breathing slowed, then steadied. A faint glow returned to his skin. Outside, Eli raised the rod like a weapon, his heart pounding. Come on then, he muttered. You want them. You'll have to go through me. The hunter stepped forward, but before it could strike, a deep rumble filled the sky. A new sound, powerful, alive, and different. Lyra's eyes widened. The rebels. They're here. Eli turned and looked up through the mist. A massive silver ship broke through the clouds, its engines roaring like thunder. Blue light flashed across the trees as the alien craft descended toward the valley. But even as hope filled the air, more hunter signals appeared on the horizon, dozens of them. The rescue had begun, but so had the final chase. The sky burned with blue and silver light. The forest shook as the rebel ship descended, cutting through the clouds like a blade. Wind tore across the trees, sending leaves spinning into the air. Eli shielded his face from the dust as the great ship's engines roared above the mine. Lyra looked up, her eyes shining with both relief and fear. They came, she whispered. They actually came, but there was no time to celebrate. More hunter crafts appeared from the horizon, sleek and deadly, their wings flashing like metal blades. They moved fast, forming a circle around the valley. Eli grabbed a broken metal bar and shouted over the wind. You said they'd bring help. How many rebels are on that ship? Enough to get us out, Lyra replied, but not enough to fight an army. A sharp explosion echoed through the trees. The first hunter ship fired. The blast hit a rock wall beside the mine, throwing dirt and sparks everywhere. Lyra fell back, covering Keo with her body. Eli helped her up. They're targeting you. I know, she said. They want the child. They'll burn everything to get him. Inside the mine, Keo's small body lay still on the blanket. His skin glowed faintly, but his eyes remained closed. The faint hum of energy from him pulsed softly like a heartbeat. Lyra touched his face, her voice trembling. Wake up, my son, she whispered. We need you. But he didn't move. Another explosion came closer, shaking the ground. The mine's entrance cracked, raining pebbles. Eli ran to the edge and looked outside. Dozens of hunters marched through the smoke, their armor reflecting the rebel ship's light. The sound of energy blasts filled the air. Lyra! He shouted. They're closing in. She looked down at Keo, tears in her eyes. If I call for more help, it will bring even more danger. But if I don't... She stopped, staring at her child, desperate. Eli knelt beside her. He saved us before, didn't he? Whatever he did, maybe he can do it again. Lyra shook her head. It nearly killed him. Then let's make sure it doesn't, Eli said. He placed his hand gently on the boy's shoulder. He's half human, remember? Maybe that part of him is stronger than anyone thinks. Lyra stared at Eli for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. She closed her eyes, whispering softly in her language. Blue light began to spread from her palms, covering Keo like a thin mist. The light shifted, and soft, alive, and Keo's eyes opened. The glow in his gaze was brighter than before, pure and deep. He sat up slowly, looking around. Mama, why is everything shaking? Lyra smiled through her tears. Because they're afraid of you. Keo tilted his head, confused. Then he looked outside the mine. Through the dust, he saw the hunters advancing, their weapons raised, their eyes glowing. Fear filled his small face. Eli placed a hand on his shoulder. Hey, kid, he said softly. You don't have to fight them. Just protect your mom, okay? That's all you need to do. Keo looked up at him, then back at Lyra. The air around him began to hum. Blue lines of light crawled across his skin like veins of lightning. The ground vibrated beneath them. Lyra gasped. "Eli, it's happening again." Keo stood slowly, his bare feet glowing on the rocky floor. His small hands lifted, trembling. The light around him grew stronger until the whole mine shone like a star. Outside, the hunters aimed their weapons, but before they could fire, the air exploded with sound. A wave of blue energy surged outward from the mine, sweeping across the valley. The trees bent, the ships shook, and the hunters' armor cracked and melted in seconds. Their glowing visors dimmed, their mechanical bodies falling to the ground like broken toys. The rebel ship above turned its engines away, shielding itself from the blast. Inside the mine, Eli covered Lyra and Keo, bracing against the wind. The entire mountain seemed to breathe, alive with the boy's power. When the light finally faded, silence fell again. Smoke curled up through the broken trees. The air smelled of rain and metal. Eli looked around, stunned. Every hunter ship was down, shattered, silent. The entire forest was still glowing faintly, as if touched by magic. Keo collapsed in his mother's arms, exhausted. Lyra held him close, her eyes full of awe. "He did it," she whispered. "He saved us again." Eli sat down beside them, breathing hard. "That wasn't saving," he said softly. "That was a miracle." Outside, the rebel ship landed nearby. Its ramp opened and figures in silver armor rushed out. One of them bowed deeply to Lyra. "Commander," he said, "the way is clear. We must leave before reinforcements arrive." Lyra looked at Eli. "They think I'm dead," she said quietly. "If I go with them, they'll hunt your world next." Eli frowned. "Then what will you do?" She glanced down at Keo. "We'll find somewhere far away, somewhere quiet." Eli nodded slowly. "You know, I think I know a place." Lyra smiled weakly, understanding his meaning. "You'd help us again?" Eli chuckled softly. "Seems like I'm already part of this mess." Keo stirred and looked up. "Mama, can we trust him?" Lyra hugged him tighter. "He's human," she said. "That means yes." Outside, the rebel engines roared again as they prepared for takeoff. The valley was quiet once more, but Eli knew this wasn't over. Somewhere out there, others would come looking. But for now, they had won. And for the first time in his life, Eli Turner, a simple farmer, felt like he had just helped save more than a farm. He had saved two worlds. The sun was rising behind the smoky hills, painting the sky in soft gold and pale pink. The battle was over. The air was still heavy with the scent of burned metal, but for the first time since that night in the chicken coop, there was peace. Eli stood at the mouth of the mine, his clothes torn and covered in dirt. His hands were shaking from exhaustion, but his eyes stayed on the horizon. The rebel ship hovered silently a short distance away, its engines humming like a calm storm waiting to move. Lyra sat beside him on a rock, holding Keo in her arms. The boy was asleep, wrapped in an old blanket Eli had found in the truck. His faint blue glow had dimmed to almost nothing, replaced by the warm, steady breathing of a child who had finally found rest. For a long time, none of them spoke. The world felt fragile, like it could break at any sound. Then Lyra looked at Eli and said quietly, "You saved us, Eli Turner." "Twice now." Eli shook his head. "I didn't save anyone," he said, staring at the ground. "That boy did all the real saving." She smiled gently. "You saved his heart. Without you, he would never have believed there was kindness left in this world." Eli looked at her, his eyes tired but warm. "You talk like you're already saying goodbye." Lyra's smile faded. She looked toward the rebel ship. "We have to leave," she said softly. "If we stay, they'll come again. My people will send more hunters. They won't stop until we're gone from your sky." Eli didn't answer right away. He looked out across the valley, his land, his home, now scarred by craters and smoke. "You could hide here," he said quietly. "I could fix a shelter, keep you safe." She shook her head sadly. "No, you've risked enough. They'll come for you if they find out you helped us. You'll lose everything." Eli chuckled dryly. "Everything? My farm's half burned. My chickens are probably traumatized, and I just fought aliens in the middle of a rainstorm. I think I already lost everything." That made her laugh softly, a sound like wind through glass. "You're strange, Eli Turner." "And you're the strangest guest I've ever had," he replied with a small grin. For a moment, they just looked at each other, a tired farmer and a weary alien mother. Two beings from different worlds who had somehow found each other in the middle of chaos. Then one of the rebel soldiers approached, bowing slightly. "Commander Lyra," he said, "the ship is ready. The enemy frequencies are silent for now, but they will return." Lyra stood, adjusting the blanket around Keo. She turned to Eli, her voice quiet but strong. "You were never supposed to be part of this. But you were the best part of it." Eli felt a lump in his throat. "You don't have to go," he said. "You could stay. Earth's big. You'd blend in," she smiled faintly. "No, my people need hope. If they know I survived, if they know a human helped me, maybe they'll believe peace is possible." She reached into the folds of her torn clothing and pulled out a small crystal the size of a thumb. It glowed softly in her palm. "This holds a piece of my energy," she said. "If you ever need me, hold it to the sky. It will call me." Eli took it carefully, the glow lighting up his rough hands. "Feels warm," he said quietly. "It remembers kindness," she said with a soft smile. He didn't know what to say. Words felt too small for what he wanted to express. So he just nodded. As the soldiers helped Lyra toward the ship, Keo stirred and opened his eyes. "Mama," he whispered, "is the man coming with us?" Lyra looked back at Eli, her eyes glistening. "No, my son," she said gently. "He belongs to this world." Keo reached out a small hand toward Eli. "Will we see you again?" Eli smiled, his voice thick with emotion. "If you ever need help fixing something, you know where to find me." The boy giggled softly and pressed his glowing hand to Eli's palm. A faint mark of blue light shimmered for a second before fading. "Now you're part of us," Keo whispered. Lyra stepped onto the ramp of the ship. The rebels followed. As the engines flared, wind whipped through the valley. Eli raised a hand to shield his eyes, watching as the ship lifted off higher and higher until it vanished into the clouds. Silence returned. Only the rustle of trees and the soft chirping of morning birds filled the air. Eli stood there for a long time, staring at the empty sky. The crystal in his hand glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. He looked down at it and smiled. "Shelter from the rain, huh?" he murmured. "Guess that's how it all started." Then he turned and walked back toward his broken farm. The sun was rising higher now, warm and bright over the wet fields, and though the world looked the same, Eli knew it wasn't. Somewhere beyond the stars, a child with human courage and alien power carried a small piece of earth in his heart. And on Earth, one farmer carried a small light that would forever remind him that kindness could cross galaxies.